So welcome for joining, and thank you for joining us here. This is one of the USGBC update sessions, LEED Performance at the Alliance Center. So today your speakers are myself and Chris Boyer. Chris is Director of Building Operations at the Alliance Center. He currently maintains his LEED AP O&M credential and has a background in engineering and construction. He's committed to the built environment and leads efforts in his region by being a member of the USGBC Market Leadership Advisory Board for Colorado, and he's volunteering to help plan our local Green Build Conference, which is Rocky Mountain Green in Colorado. I'm Lisa Stanley. I'm also from Colorado. I am one of the directors with the Technical Solutions team at USGBC, and I work closely with industry leaders across various market sectors to help implement green building practices. I've got my LEED AP, ID, and C, and have been focused on sustainability for the past 10 years. Prior to that, I was in commercial property management. So it's fun to be on this side. Can't believe it's been 10 years. So to confirm you guys are all in the right spot, here is the session description and our learning objectives. This is an intermediate level. So let's look at the agenda. We are going to look at the history of LEED for existing buildings, that rating system, a little bit of the evolution, and where is it at today. We are also going to hear from the Alliance Center, Chris, his story from the owner's perspective with their LEED journey and his certification timeline. We will then go category by category. You'll be able to learn about how the Alliance Center is working with LEED for existing buildings, operations maintenance, recertification, and you'll also then see things through the lens of the LEED v4.1 beta, which is the current version of the rating system. And we will end with key takeaways and conclusions. So again, we're talking about LEED for operations and maintenance, the rating system. This is a rating system for existing buildings, the entire building, with the advent of LEED v4.1, our O&M beta. This is also now a rating system for interiors. So if you have a partial building, you're now eligible, which is really exciting. Previously, a tenant couldn't do LEED EB on their own, but they can now. We have a path for that. Also, this is about recertification. So if you're an existing building that has been LEED certified, you're going to hear today about how your recertification path is available to go forward. That's not just existing buildings, but all LEED projects. How can you recertify, do ongoing certification with this powerful tool? This is a powerful tool that can really help move the market. If you look at our existing building stock, it's resource depleting. It's a tax on us, right? It's using resources. A lot of our new buildings we're building maybe are regenerative and this and that, but it doesn't always make sense to tear it down and put a new one up, right? There's the old saying of the greenest building is the building that's already built, which is often true, not always, but often. And if we do have a building that's already built, how can we make sure that it is truly operating at its highest potential so that we can start to reduce the draw, reduce our carbon impact? And we really owe it to future generations to do everything we can. And I'm a little bummed that this room is not more full because, as I talk about the timeline here, what we're talking about today is LEED for operations and maintenance. It's not sexy. It's not as fun. You don't have a shiny new penny at the end. In 2003, when the LEED EB pilot came to market, we had already had LEED NC for a few years. LEED NC is amazing. Nothing would be here without it. But we at USGBC, what's amazing, I wasn't there, but the key stakeholders thought, great, it's LEED certified, it's built. Now, how are they going to maintain that? How are they going to know that they're performing at that level? And the original version of the rating system was actually built for LEED NC projects to move right into. They assumed everyone would just do it, right? Because everybody's already doing the right thing with LEED NC. They're going to go on and get LEED EB certified. No, there was a little bit of resting on the laurels, or a lot maybe with LEED NC. However, that said, what's exciting is even though we have that, rub, which I feel like we're solving today on some level, We have a ton of projects and buildings that moved into this. Mostly commercial, Class A office buildings really started leveraging this tool to be better, to reduce the impact, reduce their expenses, jumped on board with the triple bottom line. 2005, we had an update to LEED. What we start to see here, and I know this is sort of a strange thing to focus on, but the naming convention. Originally, it was LEED for existing buildings. In 2008, we added LEED for existing buildings, operations, and maintenance, because this is about how you operate and maintain the building, an important and critical piece of what's going on, hence why it's not super shiny, brand new, and we don't have a huge room full. That's okay. You guys are here. Everybody matters. And in 2009, we had more updates with that rating system. It was V4 where, albeit generated a little bit of confusion, I'm even scratching my head, but what happened was we changed the naming convention. So now you see, rather than LEED EBOM, the favorite shortcut, raise your hand if you're a LEED EB practitioner in the room. Yeah. So we went from EBOM to, O&M EB. Well, it's about operations and maintenance. And we were setting the stage for what we have now, which I'll get to in a second. 2015, we started piloting the performance path to certification. This rating system has challenges with the workload. It's a big deal. You guys know that. What we started to do was work with the performance score to LEED certification, an alternate compliance path that was approved by our technical advisory committees. We also had that sort of powered through the LEED dynamic plaque. After that has been in the market for a few years, it's now rolled into the lessons learned into our LEED v4.1 O&M beta. Now, it's not just O&M for existing buildings. If you notice here, we've got O&M for interiors. Again, a partial project can participate. Important to have this open for all projects. So let's take a look at the scorecard. LEED v4.1 O&M, this is existing buildings. I'll briefly talk about the difference for interiors. But one of the things you may notice is it's radically different from the regular LEED v4 scorecard. One of the goals with LEED v4.1 was simplification. This is also a goal in 4.0. Here you see radical simplification. We went from about 50 credits down to 21. There are 7 sort of static prerequisites, the standard prerequisites that you guys are used to, where you work with the prerequisite, you submit to GBCI during your initial certification review and make sure you're meeting these things that you're used to that are policy-based and whatnot. What's new is we have 5 prerequisites that are performance score-based. So what you'll hear us talking a lot about today is the performance scores. These are data-driven tools that are simplified so that you can start to have insight into how you're performing in those categories in ways that we never had before. This is what's really allowing radical change and radical simplification to address the implementation challenges. And I'm just excited for you guys to hear Chris's story because it really helps bring to light how it's actually really seriously working. These are credits. There's 10 different credits. If you're an initial certification in 4.1, the beta, that are sort of those standalone credits that are not reflected in any of the performance scores or standard prerequisites. It's important, though, to step back and say, okay, that's maybe exciting that you simplified the scorecard, but really you got rid of all those credits? What did you do, right? I mean, it can make your hair stand up on the back of your head. But what happened is those credits are strategies. So what's happening here is we have performance scores. You get on the scale, as Scott Horst likes to say, to see where you're at. If you're a brand new project, you're coming in, you're not a Class A office building with a large budget, you're small government. What are your scores? Not what you want them to be. You go look at the LEED v4 credits and leverage them to improve your performance. But you focus on that rather than spending resources on documenting. I'll give you some examples of what that means as we dig in. And you'll see as we go through what else we have here, whether they're evaluated through the score, if they've been consolidated. As we go category by category, I'll give you a quick snapshot of where we're at. But before we do that, raise your hand if you're new to the performance score concept. Okay, cool, just a few of us. So there's 5 of them that we see in this racetrack. There's 5 different performance scores. What we saw in the scorecard we see here now. And each of them has up to 100 points. Those 100 points are then weighted and turned into, actually it's a score out of 0 to 100. That gets then weighted in accordance with the LEED system goals into points. So for example, your waste performance score for this sample project, they're up at an 89 right now on that outside racetrack, 89 out of 100. Over on the left, that translates into 7 out of 8 points. This is the Ark Platform where these scores are being generated. And also in that platform, you're able to see where's my score today, where was it last month in this one, and where was it the year before. The year before, November, that inside racetrack, 2007, they weren't doing very well. This is theoretically, they came in, they had a really bad score, they did some great work, and now they've improved. You also see your local and global averages and how you compare. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris, and he'll talk through what he's up to and these 5 different scores. You'll start to hear how they're working with them at the Alliance Center.
Thanks, Lisa. Recognize a couple of people in the room, anyone outside of those 2 that I definitely know familiar with the Alliance Center in Denver, Colorado? Okay, all right. So it'll be new information to almost everyone in the room here. So excited to talk to everyone about the Alliance Center, what we stand for, what our business is, and what we're trying to do to promote, lead USGBC and their efforts. So this is a picture of the interior of our cafe space, but the Alliance Center, it's a collaborative workspace where our organization and our tenants are bringing people together to create a world where communities are inclusive, the democracy is strong, our economy thrives, and most importantly, our planet's healthy. And I want to go a little bit into the people that we have in the building. We have 50 different organizations in the building comprising each leg of the stool of sustainability. Whether that's people, profit, planet, we will hit each one of those. Some of the groups that you may be familiar with are Conservation Colorado, as well as Conservation Colorado and the Sierra Club are some of those that are working in the traditional sustainability or environmental movement. We also have Cornerstone Capital, which is doing impact financing. We also have Lever Energy, which is doing C-PACE financing. And finally, we have Amnesty International, which is doing international social justice work. So it gives you an idea of what's in the building and who we are. We have a team of 15 people that a third of those work specifically on the building. Myself, I am in charge of all of our green building initiatives and the day-to-day maintenance of the facility. We also have a large event space, which is not seen here, but in the same area of the picture above. Some more images of our facility. The one on the right, I wanted to show you specifically, as we do have some emphasis on that area throughout these slides, but just gives you a better feel of what the Alliance Center is. And similar to Lisa's path of USGBC's efforts for existing buildings, I want to follow the path of the Alliance Center. We originally purchased it in 2004. It was built in 1908, so we have 110-year-old bones that provide a good background for us to be green as not a new building, but the greenest building is an existing building. So it's something that it comes from our history and something that we hold dear to our hearts. In 2006, we obtained our first certification, Commercial Interiors Silver. Immediately following that, we then went for our first operations and maintenance and received gold in that same year. We continued that trend moving forward in 2011 and recertified under the V2009 recertification platform. Again, and then in 2015 was the first year that we looked at dynamic plaque. Dynamic plaque was the original version of what is now Ark. We were the first in the state of Colorado to certify through dynamic plaque at the time and the 5th in the world. So we've continued to be a leader and early adopter of these initiatives, the items that USGBC is coming out with and trying to push the market. 2007, we then recertified under existing buildings, the same platform that I just mentioned, or 2017. And then simultaneously, we did not only the dynamic plaque, but also EBOM version 4. And it was, I personally did most of the work, and it was a long process, and we'll talk more about that in the future slides. But I want to stress kind of the simplicity of what Ark is and what dynamic plaque is. I'll probably sound like a broken record at points, but realistically, that's what I want to identify throughout this.
I just want to quickly point out that I don't know of a single other project that has done what the Alliance Center did here. They're really a learning laboratory. They knew they were going way above and beyond to do that initial LEED V4 initial certification, as well as all the recertification work. They really wanted to test it out. They wanted to know what's up with V4, what's up with this performance stuff. They poked it and they did it, and it's amazing. It's service back to the community. So keep going.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. The last one and the most recent one that we're the most proud of, certainly proud of V4 Platinum. That was the first in the state of Colorado under any of the V4 rating systems, but we just recertified this past month LEED Platinum through Ark. So we're very proud of what we've done and happy to see where we stand today. I'll start getting into those 5 different areas that Lisa touched on. The first one, location and transportation. And again, I'll sound like a broken record, but it's quite simple. You have a handful of credits. You have your performance scores that go out to your community, or you collect a little bit of data and upload it to the Ark Skuru website. It's pretty quite simple. For location and transportation, it's a tenant survey or a building occupant survey. You need a certain percentage of response rate, but once you send out the survey, they will provide their data. And here's what the survey looks like. You can provide mileage information, one way, one trip, and give what your trip would be. For myself, I have about a mile drive to the bus, 10 miles into work, and then a half a mile walk. It takes me about 30 seconds to do it realistically. And each individual that's in the building can do that. I want to focus on the difference between V4 and what is now 4.1 beta and or Ark. In the V4.1, it's exclusively miles, where previously it's always been number of trips. So we're calculating it based on actual miles traveled in each mode of transportation. And as all of these areas try to focus on, it's carbon reduction. That's what the entire program is trying to do. And trying to focus on miles versus just trips kind of helps with that process. Here are our scores of our most recent survey. You can see we have quite a bit on the bus and light rail, which is realistically the primary modes of transportation to the Lodo area where our building is. And we have maybe 16% of car solo. As a former transportation engineer, a 17% single occupancy rate, that's huge. I don't know if there's any transportation engineers or someone that knows parking or transportation. That's an unheard of percentage. We're lucky that the individuals that are in our building have such a high priority on mass transit or alternative forms of transportation. Finally, our score that we received. So even with those high scores, we're still a 12 out of 14. We have some room to improve and room to try to push things. We've already installed a fleet bike to try to encourage those trips to and from meetings that are nearby the building, and we have a car share in our parking lot. So we're trying to get those numbers up higher and go from there. I'll turn it back over to Lisa so she can talk about 4.1 on the location and transportation.
Thank you, Chris. And I'll just go back real quick. One of the things you see in this screenshot is one of the reports that comes out of the Ark platform when you're in there, which is pretty powerful. This is just the transportation, but you're able to see what is your CO2 impact and really start to do some carbon accounting in a way you hadn't before. Especially for this category, there's not a lot that has changed. And this slide is just to make sure you're paying attention, you know, like, are you going a little crazy? Yeah, you are. No, this fonts are a little bit tricky. Sorry about that. It got tweaked up. But this is the scorecard. And when we look at the transportation score, you do need a minimum of 6, but you can earn up to 8 more points on top of that. And when people that are maybe a suburban project or whatnot get nervous about this, we say, do the survey, do the work. It's amazing what happens with actually people are carpooling, people are telecommuting, and projects are doing well, and we are in a beta. So there's not a lot that has changed here. If we look at the credit mapping, it's pretty much a 1-to-1. Chris highlighted some of the primary changes as it relates to really looking at the miles traveled. What's, again, pretty powerful about that is you've got a really very detailed snapshot of that performance and the CO2 impact. So let's see, I'm going to tee up sustainable sites next, and then Chris will share after this. Here, sustainable sites category, we don't have any scores, we don't have any prerequisites. We have 4 credits that are available in 4.1. If you're an interiors project, you don't have these credits. Instead, those 4 points that are available have been allocated in other areas if you're that interiors project. So that's one of the primary differences between the 2 rating systems. When we look at these 4 credits, you can see here they're on the right-hand side. And so there's a couple of 1 credit plus a policy that has been blended into a new credit. And then we've got 4 credits that map over. Now, if you're an experienced practitioner, they don't map exactly. This is definitely different, V4.1. There have been changes to each of these credits. So you still want to study closely the red lines and the guide to know what the requirements are. A lot of these we have sample policies, that type of thing. Similar, but definitely some differences that I'll kind of highlight as we go. And turn it over to Chris here.
Sustainable sites, the way that it works in Ark is through human experience. So we'll talk more about it in slides later down the road. But one major aspect of that is how an individual feels in the facility. Are they too cold? Is it too loud? Is it too hot? Et cetera, et cetera. Facility managers in the room? None. Wow. Okay. All right. So that's my job, is to make sure that people are happy in their space. And that was a major aspect of what you see here. So this picture on the left was taken middle of summer. It looks like it's drab. It looks like it's cold. But our patio space was hardly ever used. And we identified it as a major miss in terms of something that we wanted to provide the community. So we made some changes. We decided that we wanted to put in beetle kill lumber. We wanted to put in planters. We wanted to put in benches, a pergola, et cetera, to give the people a space that they could really sit and enjoy. So not only during the day when they're at work, they can come out at night, have a beer, et cetera, and really enjoy this space. And the main thing that we took in consideration when doing this was not only the tenants and how much money it would take to do this, but we also looked at what benefit it would have to our score. What would it have to our human experience score? So we took some survey results. We haven't done it after the fact, but we took survey results to see how people felt before this renovation went into place. And we're going to take more results after the fact to see how that score really went up. You'll see the plants. Plants need water to grow, to live, to thrive. So we counterbalance that. We understood that our water score is probably going to decrease, so it would have a negative impact. But we're hoping that while that decreases, the water score will the human experience score will go up. So, leads me straight into water efficiency. And water efficiency is probably one of the easiest, similar with energy. If you have a utility bill, you throw it into Energy Star, and it's uploaded directly into the Ark Scorecard site. It's literally as simple as that. It takes no time whatsoever to do, maybe 5 minutes a month to realistically do what's required to get your minimum performance score points in this. There's prerequisites, of course, but in the V4.1 beta, but in terms of your performance score, the primary emphasis of your score, it's realistically that easy. And it shows fluctuations over time, which is another great piece of this score. You'll see it on one of my very last slides, how that happens.
So here's the scorecard for our water efficiency. The main reason I wanted to do this for each category, in particular this one here, again, there are the minimums that you don't see in the general scorecards. It, I think, helps just to see what's my minimum and how many can I get above and beyond that. The water efficiency category in particular is a good one to look at as far as the evolution of LEED and what we've changed over time, in particular for O&M. Originally, the certification work was very prescriptive. You had to count how many fixtures you had, how many sinks, how many toilets, what was the flow rate. If you didn't know the flow rate, because there's a lot of old things out there, you had to like flush and go into buckets. If you've been around a long, I used to be an EV practitioner. It went from this prescriptive scenario of what do you have in the building. In V4, we finally had the ability to start to benchmark against your own performance. So you could set your own baseline and how are you performing, and that was one way we started to move into performance. But now, with the 4.1 beta, we are performance-based. So how are you performing? How much water are you using? If you are not seeing the score that you want to see, or regardless, we say go look at these credits and prerequisites that are from V4. Yeah, you want to have a policy, but we're not going to review it. We're not going to micromanage you. We're going to allow you to use these things in the way you need to use them. And as a consultant, what I think is exciting about this is the ability to leverage that. You know, you've got your facility manager, you've got your boots on the ground. Those guys can do more on their own, which is incredibly powerful, but they need guidance. They need to know where to go and what to do and how to improve performance, but they don't need to waste time and money documenting and proving things to GBCI because it's going to show up in your score. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chris for energy and atmosphere.
Literally identical to the water score. You have a utility bill. You put it into Energy Star or into the Ark website, and you have a score. It's literally quite that simple. So to have a little bit of a filler around energy, I also wanted to talk a little bit about what the score represents and what Ark Scorecard really is trying to do. And I mentioned carbon earlier, and carbon is a major player in your score for your Ark in Ark. And I also have my score for Energy Star here up. So does anybody see a major discrepancy in those two scores? I'll identify it. The score of 96 in Energy Star, and then the score of 26 out of 33 in Ark. 26 out of 33 works out to between 75 and 80%. So I have quite a difference, and something that I identified 2 years ago probably as why is there this major difference in your score, and it's 100% associated with carbon. So as for anyone that may be from Colorado or from another area in the country that has dirty power, so to speak, predominantly coal in Colorado, that's accounted for because it's your source energy. It's not your site energy. So that's a major piece as to why I'm seeing numbers that to us doesn't make sense and doesn't reflect what efforts we've put forth. So it gives a little bit of emphasis to our team to work with local policy initiatives to try to green our energy sources. Just as another slide here, the CBEC data that was released a couple of months ago where the baseline data was from 2004 on the left side of your screen here. Oops, that's wrong. There you go. So this side here was prior to the CBEC release. The data over here was after the CBEC release. So you'll see my score drop pretty significantly where existing buildings have become more efficient. So I'm compared against a much more stringent and a better operating case or set of buildings. So want to identify that as well. I want to say it was early September is when that change happened, and on average, most buildings dropped by 8 points.
Yeah, Chris brings up some really good points with this category. The other thing we see here in all of these scores is you're being compared against other LEED buildings. So it is a very different reference set than, for example, Energy Star, Portfolio Manager, that type of thing. And it's usually about, I don't know, I think we were looking maybe, according to the Ark team, maybe 1 or 2 points when you've got that quote-unquote dirtier grid. I think it can be radically different, though, if you've got like a really like net zero energy source. You're going to see an incredible performance, obviously. But there's value in that, like Chris said, to sort of drive change and think beyond the building, and just rather than I plug in and don't worry about what's on the other side. But so for this category, we see a mixed bag. We've got still 2 of the prerequisites that are the standard prerequisites, fundamental refrigerant management, as well as energy efficiency best management practices. These are really important foundation work that should be done and is being done by projects that are getting certified. You then have your score, and then a couple of points or credits available above and beyond that. The grid harmonization, which you might have a hard time reading, is a new name for the demand response. And demand response, you'll see some credits that are still in here like this one, or some that have been folded in. The credits that are folded in are really, again, things that can help improve your score. Things that stayed forefront, like this grid harmonization, demand response. This is important for reducing the overall carbon impact to motivate teams to do this. Plus, we've got the different prerequisites here. So let's say you're a project and you're in the system and you are perhaps, let's take 2 different scenarios. One, you're the commercial office building that's been doing this over and over again and they're recertifying. They likely may have a really good score. They may come in and it's easy and fast to hit the minimums and go through. That's because they've been doing the work, like Chris's building. If you're new to this, you may not see that kind of score when you jump on board and get your data in. And that's where we say, go look at these credits. In particular, let's look at commissioning, ongoing commissioning, but do it in the way that works for your project, again, at your budget with your efficiency to improve your response.
The next one that I'll talk about is materials and resources, and this one is probably going from the most complex to the most simple. Lisa mentioned the water flow rates, your fixtures, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same concept here where you have your furniture that's in the building, you have your carpet tiles, you have your walls, your paints, et cetera, that you summarize with an architect or with the team that goes into a score of very few points. USGBC's made it much easier where the only need for your score in this, in terms of your performance score, is a waste audit. You could do 1 waste audit a year, and that's the minimum that's required. We're fortunate enough that, and we try to strive to be leaders, we'll do a full week's worth of audits to try to get a solid average throughout a period of time. But a waste audit takes very little time and very little effort compared to what's occurred in the past in terms of material resources. So wanted to share that. Some of the other things that we've done is we do share our recycling and trash bins with our neighbors to have fewer materials going into other bins. We have a partnership with Scraps, which is a bicycle-powered composter through the Denver area. And Christy Turner, who was a member of our team in the past, goes throughout the city and has a trike, I guess I should say, that pulls compost and dumps it into our bin on occasion. So we're trying to push not only what we're doing, but what our community can do as well.
Great. So in this category, again, we see a couple of policies that are purchasing based. the waste policy is really folded into the score. So if you aren't having the score you're looking for, you can go work on these policies as it relates to your team, and they're rolled into that performance. We do have a couple of credits, or one credit here. The purchasing credit is, I'll say it's new. It's very different. It combines 3 different credits, and it's pretty powerful. I really like it because unlike previous where you really had to, let's say you're doing recertification, you had to prove your purchasing history throughout those entire 5 years, really. You had to keep track of everything always, and that's extremely intimidating, and is it realistic, and is it our highest and best use of time? Here, we have important things to look at and set up, but if you're meeting that and you're setting that up and you can document and prove you've been doing it for a month, then that is what we're looking for in the beta. The other thing I'll highlight here, when you're working with beta and you're getting your initial certification, you're going to be doing all of these things I'm talking about with the prerequisites in particular, or credits, with your initial certification. All these projects then move into an annual review. So when you're doing your annual review and you're updating your certification every year, the only thing you're going to be focused on is the performance score. So those 5 prerequisites, those 5 scores, performance scores, that's what you maintain annually. So that's, I think, an important distinction that I haven't quite made yet, but it's something that's important for the initial certification to understand, that you move into that mode. And if you're a building that's already certified and you're moving into recertification, it's the same scenario. For that initial certification, or really if you recertify, the initial fee that you pay covers you for 5 years for each of those annual reviews. So you're not paying any extra fees each year when they just update and check and make sure you're, like Chris just did, that was one of his updates where they looked at the scores and the score data. So I'll tee up the indoor environmental quality category. The fonts here are really driving me a little crazy, but that's all right. So we've got 3 regular prerequisites. One of these is your minimum indoor air quality, which means you do still need to do an outside air test, which I think is, it's one of these things, our technical advisory committee, it's one of the things that came back in that was not here for the ACP, the performance score. But what's amazing is to hear some stories about if you have a project that doesn't have that outside air coming in, you're going to catch it in your testing. And Chris is going to talk about the tests. Green cleaning, integrated pest management. This is, again, I'll move through this one pretty quickly. Similar, we've got things that jump across, some things that are combined into that score, and then a couple of credits. Your green cleaning credit has changed quite a bit. With that, I'll let Chris talk about the meat of the score here.
Thanks, Lisa. And indoor environmental quality is the second half of the human experience score. So the first half is how comfortable are people in the building. The second half goes to air quality testing. I actually walked the floor earlier today and saw some great vendors out there that are doing air quality testing that I'm going to personally research. But realistically, it's bringing in meters in the building and doing testing in certain areas. Throughout the building, you need just 1 test for every 25,000 square feet. For me, that's 2 tests. So a couple hours in one day, a rental of the equipment, and my work is basically done. We complete a small report and upload a CSV file. It's quite simple in terms of what you're trying to do and how you get those rates to USGBC to review. And so talking about the occupant survey, that's another piece of it. The air quality is one, and as you'll see here, we're doing relatively well. I mean, we're very happy about where we stand in terms of our VOCs and CO2, and a big piece of that is what we've purchased for the building. We're trying to make sure low VOCs, there's high recycled content, there isn't off-gassing from those materials, and it shows in this score. So all the work that the architects, the design team does to really work on a building, it's showing off because that was a major piece of what our renovation was that we completed 4 years ago.
I'm gonna go back to Chris's slide really quick. We're nearing the end, and Chris is going to show you his scores in total. This, I think, helps show it even more. If you take a look at the score, he's really being modest when he says we're doing fairly well. I'm not sure what you used. They're knocking it out of the park. They've got a 92 out of 100 in this category, and that's not by any accident. They are doing a ton of amazing work. Now, what's important here is for you guys to notice the local and global average, how much higher they are here, how much higher performing they are. And he's going to highlight this in a minute, but there's a few categories where there's a huge delta. And it's one of the key takeaways. So we're wrapping up here. We're at innovation. Innovation is 1 point, and you can get that through your LEED AP. You can go to the pilot credit library. You can do the innovation credit library, all kinds of things available for meeting that if you're doing that initial certification to get that point. The regional priorities have gone away, those points. Really with the scoring, it was something that made sense to phase out. So with that, turn it over to Chris.
So realistically, it's a simple question, easy or hard? My experience is the Ark Platform, the process that it requires to go through to recertify or get your initial cert is incredibly easy when compared to the V4 version. I spent 18 months recertifying our building through V4. I spent about 3 on Ark for the very first time that I did it, and that was with some trouble and issues that we had with the platform itself and it being a beta of its own in 2015. So there was a lot going on, and it's incredibly easy to use. What I will say is probably the most drastic piece, not only is it easy, but our scores. Our score right now is an 81 through the Ark Platform, and that was collected on Sunday. The score through our V4 certification was a score of 80. So nearly identical scores with 2 different systems. Generally, they work the same way, but USGBC has done their homework where a system that many of you are already familiar with V4, you can shift and trust that your score under the Ark Platform will be identical, if not very similar. And I mentioned earlier how much the score changes. Whenever you're putting in your water score, your energy score, that changes every month. I want to say Friday we did our last prep session on this. We had a score of 80. I uploaded information from Excel, which is our energy provider, and it bumped our score up to an 81. So that gives you the sorry for those USGBC, the dynamic piece of it. The prior history of this being called dynamic plaque. I love that. I love the word dynamic because it really is. It shows how it can change over time. And it's great to be able to see that what USGBC's done gives you nearly identical scores and on a much easier platform.
Thank you, Chris. And I just think that, again, his story is really powerful. I don't know if we'll ever have another one like it because it takes a lot of hard work to do an initial LEED V4 certification. And then I guess if you're moving into it, you would see it. But for him in particular, to really take that step back rather than just recertifying, those of you who are practitioners in the room would understand the service they did there was pretty amazing. So the Ark Platform is really the power behind these scores, and we really are at a monumental stage with what we're able to do. With this simplification, you can be focused. You can be focused on what needs to happen. More can come in and really help us move the market when we're able to see those scores and those racetracks. And it is really the LEED dynamic plaque. It's not really being branded as that anymore, but it is. It's that dynamic plaque and those scores that get updated. So, yeah.
So one of my last slide for today, and thank you for everybody coming. I wanted to show our scores that were pulled just very recently. And yeah, I did get an updated grab on this one as well. So you'll see our score of an 81 there, but you also see all the different categories and where we stand in each one of those. And while I don't like to pat myself on the back very much of how our building is operating, We're very proud that we're leading not only in a local but also global basis. So you'll see the averages, the two small little icons. If you want to look at energy, our score of 77, the global average is 74, and the local average in the Denver area is 66. And that continues all the way down through to get to overall 81. So while we are happy about that, what I wanted to identify is these different categories and how the existing building market and the real estate market is putting focus. You'll see in energy, most everybody's right behind us. They're really close to us. That's indicative, at least in my eyes, that people are focusing on energy. They're not focusing on water, waste, transportation, human experience. Those are all significantly behind, and in some areas, for human experience, 52 or 53 versus a 92. That's where we take a holistic approach to sustainability. We try to bring in all of those pieces in the building to focus and counterbalance what we're doing on our patio, where we're okay dropping our water, but increasing our human experience. It's a holistic approach, and I'm hoping that kind of seeing this and other people seeing this get that experience and see where other buildings can try to improve.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I just think it's powerful to see that, to be able to visualize, a high-performing building on all levels versus just the energy, and to help motivate all projects to start to look at those scores because they really can make an impact. So the Ark Platform, I'll just wrap up by saying it goes beyond an individual building. There's some amazing tools in there. You can use this at a portfolio level. With more than one project, you create your own portfolio for free in there, whether it's if you're a consultant and you want to see your group of projects, great. If you're an organizational owner, you can have your projects in a portfolio and leverage that to set goals across all of these categories, track against your goals. There's some powerful tools and analytics in the system that go above and beyond what we're talking about. And so with that, I've been with USGBC for about 6 years now, and I really feel like we are at a place with this being an official rating system and coming together with the recertification piece where we're ready to kind of put a bow on something that has been in process for a long time, and it's very exciting. So let's get all the buildings in and do what we need to do. So we've got time for some questions before you guys head to your next session. Yeah, go ahead.
So if you have an existing building that's currently certified under version 4 of the ONM rating system, how does that transition to 4.1? Can you certify with 4.1? Or,
Yeah, great question. So the question is, if you've got a building that's certified to LEED v4, how do you recertify with 4.1? And basically what you do is you work with what I talked about today, but just the performance scores. And we've got a press release coming out today even. We've made some announcements. We've got some new guidance where we've got some detailed information about here's the recertification path using these performance scores. We've got many projects that are recertifying now on a regular basis through this performance path. But we just haven't had the formal guidance to back it up, and it's now working to be in alignment in just perfectly with 4.1. So it also then wraps in those NC projects and whatnot. But you move in, you start using your performance scores, you submit for review, you pay your review fee, and then every year you keep those scores current across those 5 categories. So if you were to look at the LEED v4.1 beta guide, which you'll get pointed to from the recertification guidance, you're just going to focus on the score work.
You will need 12 months of data before you are able to review. So that 12 months of energy and water data are a requirement before you can do that first recertification through the Ark platform.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's good feedback.
Some things like, I can't remember now if this is the new version, that you have to have a vacuum cleaner with a dust spot efficiency or something, and you can't even buy them in
Yes.
but to get it past the reviewer, you still have to put it in there.
Well, I hope that you are able to take a look at our current policy drafts. There are draft policies out there now that meet these requirements, and
Don't like draft policies. We already have policies.
Right.
We use the policies we have and just add whatever's needed to fulfill the goals.
well, and
Write something new that's
if you were to take the draft policy and include all of what's in there, right? The question is, does it have the annoying things that aren't even in alignment with what you can do? So I'd be happy to, take this up with you offline, and because I think your feedback is important. I know we've done a lot of work internationally, and we may have addressed some of those issues. I'm not sure what changes we made in the policies related to the international piece, but I hear your other concern too. Now, if you had a building policy that was your own policy that truly included each of the pieces that we see as required, and you point those out to us, that would work. You don't have to, yes, definitely. You don't have to use our draft policies. You just need to show us that you're really addressing what we think is important. And yeah. Yes, behind you.
What do you see as the future of LEED O&M if it's really, if you will, kind of aligning with Ark? I mean, I'm not leading LEED O&M, but I'm just kind of wondering about the future if it's aligning with Ark and it makes sense because it's performance-based, or does that kind of make LEED O&M?
No, not at all, really. What you'll start to see is Ark. It's powered by Ark. That's the platform that's generating these scores. They're both USGBC products, and you'll start to see a little less of a. You'll see them integrated more. So, for example, you'll be using LEED Online, and it will automatically be going into Ark, and they'll work together, so you don't feel like you're here and then you're there, and it's this and it's that. And it's more about Ark is the tool for the scores that is powering this process, especially for recertification. That's where we really see it. So I see that the future is in getting more and more buildings in through the initial certification, which is still very, it will be in LEED Online, but the performance score pieces will be happening in Ark. Even when you're doing your recertification, you'll be going through LEED Online to do it, but it is more focused on the scores. But as a practitioner, then you can really help more buildings come in because it's a little bit lower bar to at least get started. It doesn't mean they're going to cross the finish line. It's a lower bar to start, but it doesn't mean it's a lower bar total. You've got to get the right scores. And that's where you can help the teams in a way that makes sense for them, coaching them doing more work. So I find it quite exciting. But yeah.
And for the consultants in the room, if you're concerned about loss of businesses or loss of business, the way that I've tried to broach it is, yes, this process is much easier for the consultants, but what do you do after the fact whenever you see a score? As a consultant, you're able to look at that score and try to educate the company you're working for as to what improvements they can make, whether it's mechanical commissioning or energy retrofits, et cetera. You can then try to educate them on what are some of those next things.
Cooling tower is one of the ones I was going to highlight. Like if you've got a cooling tower at your project and you're not using that credit and the strategies in there, you're missing out big time. There's a ton of money or a ton of water that can be lost for those cooling towers if they're not managed properly. So you can bring those. They don't have those skills. They don't have time to learn them. So you still are able to help bring that to teams. I see another question. Yeah.
Can you describe how baselines are determined for this performance-based or energy and water, but also survey-based?
If you look at the LEED v 4.1 guide, which is available online for everyone to download on our resource page for 4.1. It goes through each of the scores and helps you understand the methodology behind the scoring. It is in the reference guide now. It's much more transparent than it's just a score. You're able to really kind of dive in and see it. The question is still the reference set. What am I compared against? which makes people go a little crazy. But it's the database of buildings that are LEED certified, and if you've got a really unique space type, then I think it's worth it to double check with USGBC and connect. But other than that, it's just been, like Chris said, for most projects, it's pretty straightforward. Yeah. Yeah. Building type, building size, building occupancy is very important. Operating hours is very important. Climate is very important. All of those things are taken into account, and it is an algorithm, and you're clustered with your right group and then scored appropriately. Yeah.
Because you can only choose one building type, though. So it's difficult if you have like 49% hotel and 51% office. So then you will hardly manage the water score.
Yeah, yeah. And there's, some nuances with that. Like I said, I work with a lot of airports. I've got a colleague that works with a lot of convention centers. If you had a really unique space type like that, again, it's worth it just to reach out and connect with us on what's the best path forward. And I can see iterations over time to help fine-tune some of that from a more automated point of view, but it's definitely not a barrier. What's that? Which we can, but it looks a little different in 4.1. So you are able to tell us which space types you have in the project in your occupancy calculator now with 4.1. Yeah.
You mentioned on the interiors projects that before sites credits go somewhere else.
I don't have those handy, but basically there's different places where the threshold, the credit didn't really go anywhere else, but I'm going to totally botch it, but let's say it's an indoor air quality one, and you've got an extra point available in one of the green cleaning or something. I can't remember exactly which ones they are, but other places have extra. They're redistributed, yes. So when you read through the scorecard, you'll see, EB 1 point, interiors 2 points for 4 credits, or I can't remember which ones.
In the case of a tenant space where you don't necessarily, where utilities aren't consistently billed or aren't sub-metered, I believe there's a prorating.
Exactly. You are able to do that. Yes. Yep. And it's all in that beta guide for all these for the 2 different. Any last burning questions? Okay, we'll take these 2, and then we're about out of time. Yes. Yes. Unless you're talking about right now today, no, it's offline because we're in a beta. But it will be in LEED Online. So LEED Online. It'll all be through LEED Online. Our IT team is working on the integration. So soon you'll be in LEED Online. You'll definitely be documenting in a very similar way you're used to the prerequisites, the 10 credits, whichever ones you're choosing. There'll also be a portal there to Ark. So it's a streamlined integration. We don't have that today, but we will. Yes. Yes. And we do go into some detail on that in that beta guide. Yep. Clayton.
Chris,
oh, one more.
Yeah, I mean, the learning experience was definitely something that I think USGBC and ourselves educated one another as to how to really have a system that's easily used. And I think Lisa's touching on it with LEED Online, where IT team's working on next iterations of the system so that you can put information in. The other one that comes to mind is our energy score. That was a big learning opportunity as to whether it's source versus site EUI. And
really being okay with, the 96 to the 75, right? Like
right.
You have a different reference set here.
Right.
And
yeah.
At the end of the day, you're 80 points, 81 points, right?
Right.
So
So I mean, I
The
get
points.
I get questions from people in the Denver area constantly about our energy score and why there is that major discrepancy. And it's coming, the carbon piece of it, which is in the tool itself online. You can really look at your carbon savings and how you can tweak and how you can improve. But having that knowledge of source versus site was probably one of the biggest pieces, at least on my end.
I'm sorry, you had a question. Yes.
Do they have to register under the 4.1 data?
No.
Could they still do the
You can still do V4.
cutoff date? Or
We don't have any cutoff dates. I'm sure at some point we will, but right now we certainly don't, because this is number one, a beta, which we've never done before. I think it's really awesome to have it be a beta, so you're beta testing it before it even goes to public comment. If you remember, before public comment period, and then you've got, the approvals, So boom, it'll move out of beta. Even then, what would be the deadline? So we're a ways out. Thanks, guys. I think we might be out of time. If you need to start leaving the room, go ahead. I don't want you to be late to another session, and come on up for the follow-up questions. But
Thanks.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you.